Hey everyone, this is Mike, and as you can see by the title, it finally happened. I started playing Paladin. Now, of course, this isn't something that just happened last week. I've been doing it for about 7 weeks now, but it is something that is still somewhat relevant considering how long that I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV. Now, Paladin was the only job that I never really paid any attention to in 14, and in previous expansions there was more of a reason for that. When I first started playing the game back in Heavensward, it took a little while for me to get into tanking in the first place because I started out playing as a DPS main, and at that time Warrior and Dark Knight were just so much better compared to Paladin, both in terms of how enjoyable they were to me, in the terms of gameplay, and then also in terms of balance. Paladin back then wasn't really in a good spot, and adding on top of that the boring gameplay compared to what Warrior had back then, and then Heavensward Dark Knight, it just meant that it didn't really see much play for me outside of getting it to level 60. Moving into Stormblood, things did get a little bit better for Paladin, especially from a balance perspective, but I still wasn't really a fan of its gameplay. Holy Spirit did add a little bit more variety to the rotation, but I didn't like having cast times on a tank. So outside of playing around with it a little bit during the first raid tier, it again was put to the side, and I pretty much only played Warrior for that expansion because I wasn't really a big fan of Stormblood Dark Knight. And now we're in Shadowbringers. Tank balance is pretty much the best that it's ever been at the moment, and Requiescat also got changed to where cast times are now instant during its buff. And then the rotation got expanded upon again with the introduction of Atonement as well. So while I was leveling Paladin, I was actually enjoying it a fair bit. Now the problem is though that we're spoiled for choice. We have 4 tanks at the moment, 2 of which I really like playing, those being Warrior and Gunbreaker. And I've always also been someone that prefers to play main tank over off tank, and of course out of all of the tanks, Paladin is kind of your designated off tank. And then again, it also didn't really help that most of the co-tanks that I've played with over the years have mainly been Paladin players, so there are a lot of reasons why it took a little while for Paladin to get its time to shine with me. However, ever since my static passed the 8-week mark for Savage, we ended up getting a new member because our Dragoon ended up dropping out and I got a new co-tank to play with, and I decided that this would be a pretty good time to change things up a little bit, much like what I did with Black Mage in the previous raid tier. I wanted to give Paladin more time, not just because I've ignored it for most of the time that I've been playing 14, but because I also wanted to get more experience on it. My new co-tank being a Warrior main meant that this was pretty much the ideal scenario to do so, because I was going to be off-tanking the fights a whole lot more, and of course that's where Paladin shines. And just like with Black Mage, I'm glad that I did, because I've actually been enjoying the job a whole lot more than I was initially expecting. I'm still not that good at it though. Like, if I try to keep up with my stream chat, I easily lose track of where I'm at in the rotation, and at the start I forgot to use Requiescat a lot as well, but that is getting a lot better now. The reason why I'm bringing up stream chat as well is because I mainly play Paladin during my raids with my static, and I usually stream those as well, and I always try to be interactive with my chat, because of course that is what I enjoy most about streaming, so that is why I can get sidetracked from my rotation here or there. So there's still a lot for me to learn, like getting the muscle memory and all of that stuff, especially looking towards the optimization side of things. I haven't really looked at that at all, things to do with downtime, etc. But I'm not really too concerned about that right now, as I'm only playing it for about an hour every week when I go into E9, E10, because those are the 2 fights that I play it for, because with 11 we do something where Gunbreaker is just the best for it. Yes, you can do it with the other tanks, but Gunbreaker just makes things so much easier. And then for 12 I just take a little bit more serious, so I wanted to play something that I feel comfortable on, which Paladin is definitely not at that level just yet. So, if there is one aspect of Paladin that I had to choose that I like the most, then it's actually going to be Requiescat. The thing that put me off from playing Paladin back in Stormblood is now something that I think is pretty neat, because having played Warrior and Gunbreaker before in this raid tier, there were certain parts of fights where I would have to disengage from the boss, and if I wanted to play it as optimally as possible, I might have had to get really sketchy with greeding for that 1 extra GCD to get that little bit of extra uptime. Whereas with Paladin, if I'm inside of Requiescat, I can just chill, walk away slowly, enjoy my uptime, and not really have to care about all of that. Yeah, of course, I am losing auto attacks if I'm just standing away from the boss for a longer period of time, but it is still much better than having to lose 1 or 2 GCDs, depending on how safe you're playing it. Anti-air from E9 Savage comes to mind for this one, because it is out, then you have the big AoE tank buster, so you need to stay away again, and then you can move in. Like, yes, there is an uptime strat for it, but it's still pretty tight on positioning, both for yourself as well as for the rest of the party, if you want to keep melee uptime. So this just makes things a whole lot easier if you can take that extra step backwards and still keep casting your spells. Speaking of anti-air, hallowed ground is also so much comfier as an invuln there as well, because it gives you those 2 extra seconds that you don't have on Gunbreaker. I'm using Gunbreaker here as an example, because that's the only other job that I have personally done the uptime strat with. So even though it's only 2 seconds and it doesn't look like a lot, it actually does make a significant difference. I do know that Dark Knight also has 10 seconds on their invuln, but Dark Knight is again another tank that I don't really play all that much. So all I can say is that finally getting into play Paladin more has been a pretty pleasant surprise to me. Once my aesthetic is done raiding, there's a high chance that it will again not see that much play anymore, and I will most likely just stick to playing Warrior and Gunbreaker for the most part. But whenever I feel like switching things up again, I might go towards Paladin instead of Dark Knight, or maybe I'll just be switching between the tanks a little bit more often now than I used to doing before, because I do like my variety, and having another job that I can add to the list is something that I always welcome. And being able to flex job is also something that is pretty useful, so you can adapt to the needs of your group, which is something that I do value quite a bit as well. So that's pretty much all I had to say. Paladin has been a pleasant surprise to me, been enjoying it a whole lot more in this expansion than I would have ever thought that I would really enjoy the job, and I'm definitely going to be putting some extra time into the job as well. I do know that my warrior is going to be dropping after we've done 8 weeks again. My aesthetic is going to be continuing weeklies, so we'll see what ends up being my new co-tank. Maybe I'll go back to playing main tank Gunbreaker, maybe I'll stay in the off-tank role if it's another warrior player that joins. We'll just have to wait and see. And then we'll also see whether or not the Paladin adventures continue, and if they do, maybe I'll take it into E12 Savage as well to see how I do over there. But that's gonna do it for me. I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.